Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with an awesome new knife consult for you on the Mavknives Heian. Now before you go looking up how to spell that, I'm going to go ahead and open this really big, awesome pelican case that the knife comes in and show you that this is the Mavknives Heian. This Mavknives logo right here and birth certificate on this very nicely done foam insert shows all the information right up front. You have the Heian. This is a name derived from the period of Japanese history in which the Tanto blade shape was introduced. That will make sense as soon as we open the knife. It shows you the specs right here. The blade is Bifrost pattern Damascus steel done at 61 Rockwell. That's always reassuring to see that on a custom knife that they've tested the hardness. This has Alien Timascus with zirconium collars, and this is serial number 1. The designer and maker, Nick Marshall, aka Mavknives, you can follow him on Instagram at Mavknives, is out of Pennsylvania in the United States, and he's been making kitchen knives for a little over a year. A lot of them in high materials like Damascus steel and other fancy handle materials. But now he's trying his hand at folding knives, and as the serial number denotes, this is the very first one he's ever done. It's really interesting to me. He kind of went from 0 to 100 because a lot of makers will start with very simple, maybe a titanium frame lock with a flipper tab or a thumb stud or even just something else. But he went straight for the front flipper full dress model right here, and so I have to give him props. But as we go through the details on this knife, we must also respect that this is the very first folding knife that he has ever made, and so it's interesting to me to see what's going on right here. I'm going to go ahead and put the case out of the way. Very nice touch. We all appreciate a nice knife case, and that one is as nice as it can possibly get. But here you can see the pattern going on right here. Let's see if I can get my camera to focus. It's not wanting to. I don't know why that is. Let's see if we can do that. Is this it? There we go. Now we've got it focused. Look at that beautiful, beautiful knife right here. Absolutely, stunningly, beautifully finished. But what you're going to immediately draw a comparison to, I think, is another very popular front flipper model right now, and that is the Gareth Bull Knives Chamois. I think that Nick certainly likes the look of the Chamois, but really they are not exactly the same. They certainly share some similarities, but I think that the Heian here is different enough, even in the handle shape, to justify being a totally different knife. Really, it has a different pattern. There are lots of front flippers that also resemble the Chamois, some from Trevor Berger and many others, because it's just the nature of the front flipper. So I think a lot of people have said that they are very close or even a copy. I really have to disagree. It really is a different pattern on the handle altogether. And then certainly the differences change as soon as you open the knife. This one features the Japanese style Tanto. I just misfired it right there. That's my own fault. It's just sort of the nature of front flippers. You have to learn how to flip them the right way. Each one kind of has its own sort of opening language, and we'll talk about that as we get through the details on this knife. This one, as I mentioned, features that Japanese Tanto, thus giving the name Heian a lot more meaning, because that is the period of Japanese history in which the Tanto was introduced, and this is his homage to that. So very nicely done. Let's go ahead and get some vital signs here on the Heian. It's a small knife. It looks very big in the pictures, but really you're getting just a 3-inch blade. You're about 3.3 to the pivot and 7 inches overall, so not a very big knife at all. The handle is under 4 inches, maybe about 3.9 inches, with an effective grip area about 3 3/4. It has some very nice dimensions to it. Let me go ahead and zero this out right here. The blade stock is coming in here at a very nice 0.1225. Very thin, slicey, also hollow ground. And the handle thickness is coming in at 0.43, so well under half an inch. These small dimensions keep the weight very light on this knife, and it comes in at 3.33 ounces. Very, very lightweight for a knife of this size. So you're getting a 3-inch blade for 3.3 ounces, very close to that golden ratio for actual EDC. Let's bring out another couple of knives for a size comparison. I'll bring out the Spyderco Para 3 and the Paramilitary 2. Obviously, this knife is smaller than the Para 3, so it's going to be very much smaller than the Para 2. I'll bring out that Gareth Bull Knives Chamois again, so you get a bit more of an appreciation for the differences in the overall design language. They are not quite the same. Their lines are not the same. Their slopes are not the same, and certainly their blades are not the same. But it is obvious to see some of the influences going on there. So let's go ahead and break this knife down anatomically. Up front is that beautifully done compound ground Japanese style Tanto with the primary bevel done as a hollow grind. The tip is done as a flat grind. Very nice flats. Very nice sort of drop point Tanto look to it. Very aggressive looking. Clearly this has a user but also sort of a tactical look to it. I really, really like that. It's beautifully hollow ground. If I can show you the heel of the blade and how thinly ground that is there. One thing that I can appreciate is that Nick's origins are from the kitchen knife sort of making game. And in kitchen knives, the name of the game is thin and slicey. That's the whole point. And so he's been practicing for a year to make the thinnest, sliciest grinds he possibly can with various types of Damasteel. So applying that to a folding knife is a very nice thing to see, and so I can appreciate that the goal of these knives is going to have is to be very functional as well as to be very beautiful, and that is definitely carried out here. This thing is extremely sharp. He definitely knows how to sharpen a knife as well as grind one beautifully. So it'll be exciting to see how he evolves this blade shape. It's a little bit hard to see with all the Damasteel swirly patterns. It almost is like the camouflage that you see on concept cars floating around. It hides the angles of the grinds, but hopefully you see it as it dances through the light there. I appreciate that it's got a nice swedge to it, easy to sharpen after the fact. You can even choke up a little bit if you so choose into that space for a little bit more grip on the knife. There is a little bit of jimping on the top. Mostly that has to do with the front flipper, and it allows you to get some purchase with your thumb. It doesn't provide a whole lot of grip in the actual open position. You feel that it's there, but it's not providing a ton of traction. Really, this is just very smooth in the hand, and that's quite nice. The thumb rests very nicely on top of the blade. If you turn your fingers over like this, it's got a nice grip for over the top. And at 3 inches, it's a very nice size. This is honestly not the most threatening knife, even though it is a Japanese-style Tanto blade, which is technically a tactical-style blade shape. It's not an overly sized knife, and it does not appear to be overly aggressive. Moving back to the pivot, this thing is adorned with very large zirconium pivot collars. I think this is an exercise by Nick to show what he wants to do with the design, how he can add the biggest collars possible. Certainly, I appreciate that. If you recall, during my time, during the creation of this chamois, I asked Gareth to use the largest amount of mokume that he could to make the largest collars possible. And that is what Nick seems to have done even more so, is just make the biggest possible collars and big pieces of zirconium. The interesting thing about these is that he actually had to hand cut these. He did not have any sort of a tool to cut out a perfect circle. He had to just make this with raw materials like a belt cutter and then like a Dremel, and he just ground it to how it is. So props to him for that. It definitely took him much longer than he anticipated, and he needs some tools, I think, to make more perfect circular patterns. But you got to appreciate the hard work that went into that. The other thing that's really nice about this knife is that internally it's running on skiff bearings. That may not mean a whole lot to everyone who's listening to this, but if you've been following the recent trends of knife manufacturing, Skiff Workshop, aka Skiff Made Blades, aka Skiff Knife Works, the folks that I reviewed the Accomplice not too long ago, they are making their own proprietary ball bearing system with very thick phosphor bronze washers and very nice ceramic bearings in them, and they are sort of a new and upcoming trend in the knife market, and so it's cool to see the use of that here. I think we will see them more and more in some more high-end custom knives. They're extremely high-quality bearings. I've taken this knife apart and looked inside. It's very nicely done. It's running with these bearings on the inside, and it's just extremely, extremely smooth. So the action, you know, this is where I've had to talk with Nick a little bit about the knife itself. You saw me misfire it maybe at the beginning of the video. I feel that the detent is a little bit on the weaker side, but that's sort of the nature of front flippers. They sort of have to be on the weaker side so that more people are going to be able to open them. I prefer a stronger detent because I'm more capable with it. As you can see, I can open this knife quickly and aggressively and over again like that. But it took me a while to learn how to do that the right way, and I certainly misfired it a number of times, which you saw in this video. I think that the issue is sort of the geometry of the flipper tab. Again, I have to give Nick credit because he has never even handled a front flipper knife before, and he figured out the geometries on his own. He doesn't have a chamois as a point of reference. He just made this up as he went along. What I notice here from the sort of geometry of the flipper tab, I think that the chamois one may be a touch higher. It's hard for me to really say. Maybe they're very similar. Maybe this one just has more traction on it. Maybe he just needs a little bit more jimping on there. But what I can say is I feel that the travel distance is a little bit farther maybe than the chamois. Let me see what I'm doing here. I'm going to actually figure this out right here on the video. If we figure out the relative distance, it's pretty much exactly the same. I think he's done a good job. Basically what I'm saying is every front flipper knife speaks its own language. Very much unlike a folding knife or a flipper knife where you just press the flipper and the knife opens, and that seems to be fairly consistent from knife to knife. Front flippers all have their own sort of language, and once you figure it out, it's an easy thing to do. This one took a little bit of time. I think it would be helped by a little bit more detent and a little bit more lock bar tension. Now, Nick's goal was to have the absolute most minimum amount of lock bar tension. There is okay lockup. This is something that I've had to talk to him about. There is the faintest hint of up and down play, and that is easily remedied by pushing on the lock bar. And so what he told me is that he wanted the least amount of lock bar tension possible, and I think he just needs to dial it up a little bit more with a little bit of heat. This is the only mistake that I have found on the knife, and it is something that is easily fixable, and it really is quite impressive that I know that that's going to be a simple technical fix. And it should actually improve the action on the knife a little bit because it should increase the detent just a little bit, making it a much more snappy release when the knife opens. So let's move back and talk about these beautiful handles right here. To get a cloth and clean them off, I've been touching them. I refuse to wear gloves for my videos, but we know that the Timascus and Mokutais like to discolor with our finger oils. So let me get this very clean for you guys and show you the beautifully finished Alien Timascus. So Timascus is the alpha knife supply material, and so it requires a little bit of extra forethought before you finish the knife. Timascus is a little bit difficult for new makers because one side of the billet is going to have this pattern, and the other side, if you flip this piece of titanium over, the underside loses the pattern. And so it's sometimes easy for new makers to use this side of the Timascus and then flip it around and try to do it with this and then mess it up. But he's used the right side. You use the correct side on both sides of the knife, nailed it, and then he used it for the clip as well. Beautifully, beautifully finished, contoured scales. You have to appreciate that he went all out on this knife from the beginning. You would think that someone doing their first folder might want to use titanium or something simple, maybe some micarta, maybe a carbon fiber, something that you can mold easily and not lose a ton of money. But here we see he used this Alien Timascus. The backspacer is more of the Bifrost Damasteel. Beautiful floating backspacer pattern with nicely done washers on either side. The screws thread into the steel, so I like that construction. It comes together quite well. I've taken it apart a number of times, and it does center itself right back up. It may be a bit on the loose side right now because I've been flipping it for all this video, and I have not Loctited this. This knife belongs to another member of the community who has graciously allowed me to check this out. There, it goes back on center. Very nice. Very, very nice. So thank you to him for allowing that to happen. I'm really thankful to get this knife in my hand. So what do I think of this knife? The long story short is, this knife is extremely impressive for somebody's very first knife make. He's never made another folding knife before, but he's made a series of kitchen knives. So that means that his original intent is for user-focused cutting tools and to make fancy things second. And so he does both of those things very well. His training has really gotten him ready for the finish game. Now we just need to see him perfect the technical game of the folding knife. There is a mechanical issue in this knife in that there is a tiny bit of blade play. You could call that lock rock, but that is easily remedied by a little bit of heat to the lock bar here and a little bend. And so then that's going to be fixed and the lockup will still be good. The lockup is still good despite there being a little bit of rock. And so the fundamentals are there. All of this is going to be great. I think that, you know, with the first couple of knives that any knife maker makes, there are going to be some issues. But really, it would seem like this is a knife from a maker that's been making folding knives for a very long time, and this is the very first one. So take this all with a grain of salt. His books may be relatively open. I know that just my Instagram posts alone took him from 5 orders to about 20 orders, and so he may be slowing down that order list right now as he tries to catch up. I can't tell you that this knife is perfect or that your example is going to be perfect, but I think that with a tiny little fix, this is pretty close to a perfect front flipper fancy knife. And it is a nice breath of fresh air in the market right now. Certainly the Shamwari dominates the front flipper market right now in terms of popularity, but it's amazing to see new makers coming out with front flipper designs that also speak their own language, and this one certainly does. I can't wait to see what else Nick Marshall of Mavknives has coming for us down the pipeline. I would definitely like to get one of these knives, maybe in a 3.5-inch size pattern right there. And so I've asked him to be on the list, and so maybe one of these days in the next few months, I'll get my own build from him, and we'll see how that goes. So thank you guys for watching. Leave some comments down below about what you think of the Mavknives Heian. Definitely go check out Mavknives on Instagram and follow him there for any more updates on his books and everything. And click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel here. And as always, guys, this is Dr. Frunkey saying take care.